The math says life shouldn't exist. I just read an article about that very topic, which is something I have an interest in, studying natural philosophy, which is the earlier area of science and biology, passed on through Aristotle and the natural sciences, what was used to be called natural philosophy. I've always been an advocate for how life on Earth mathematically doesn't make any sense. The models we have don't answer how life came about on Earth. And I just stumbled upon a really neat article that came from a professor in London. And yeah, they used an AI model. They put information and data into the model to see what was the mathematical percentage of success. And it's literally 0.00000000001% chance. You're better off winning the lottery every day for the rest of your life than finding a way to create something from nothing. Life, and especially single-celled organisms, how it came about, you did not just, put a bunch non-matter to matter. That's a big question. We have plenty of evidence of non-living matter in the whole universe. It's everywhere. We easily can find that. Every moon and satellite, comet, planet, star, in every solar system, every galaxy, it's everywhere. Matter and everything on the periodic table is empirical evidence that can be measured, tested, and seen throughout the world. But not living life. And scientists since Darwin and even before have tried to debunk the creation story. They call it a myth, and atheists especially love to badger Christians and our beliefs in the creation story. It makes more sense, and it's actually more plausible, that life came about through an intelligent designer, a creator, a god, whatever you want to call it, than not. So, I wanted to share a few reflections about how math says life shouldn't exist with our new AI computer tools, which are extremely powerful, by the way. Nothing has ever even come close to the power we have in computing. From quantum computing and AI together is just, it's Star Trek level stuff. So, the summary of this article, and I'm going to just briefly go through it. If you're interested, please stay tuned, because at the end, I'm going to explain to you how the mystery continues. Life's origin story, just become basically even more mysterious. And I've read articles for decades about this, and I've studied it myself in seminary. I had a wonderful professor, a Jesuit professor, who was very tough. He was one of the most difficult priests, and I liked him because of that, because he pushed the boundaries of my understanding of it. And so, but yeah, mathematical and information data put into an AI model points towards that spontaneous emergence of life from non-living matter may be almost near, it's not just far more difficult than scientists once believed, but almost near impossible. Almost near impossible. So this article was in Universe Today. They are well sourced, and it came out a couple days ago, October 26th. And it illustrates, early life, including water and other things seeping out of the magma, everything coming out of the earth, from its core, and how we've come to this incredible, magnanimous, complex, beyond complex ecosystem, all of them combined, we call Earth, all the billions of creatures and plants and animals, points towards, the study points towards it being near impossible. But he takes a fresh look at it with AI. And the question is, how did life arise from non-living material on Earth? Well, this researcher, Dr. Robert G. Andress of Imperial College London, created that program. And he suggests, because the model suggests, that spontaneous appearance of life is near impossible that it then, well, he says may have been far less likely than scientists believed. But reading deeper, it's pretty obvious that this is unanswerable. The improbable odds of life emerging naturally are near impossible. The research examines how extraordinarily difficult it would be for, organized biological, not just life forms, but information. How the information gets passed between two cells to create a multi-celled organism. No science can explain it. And I preach that because I believe God created everything and people need to know the truth. We have a huge 7,000-year tradition since Adam and Eve in the creation story and the scripture that's been borrowed through every culture in the whole last 7,000 years. We don't have anything that goes back before that because our earliest forms of information, for example, writing, and cuneiform, any form of writing, the Sumerians, which is in the Fertile Crescent, they're like the earliest form of writing that we have, and they're written on stone tablets. That's the earliest that we have information being saved and transferred, et cetera, et cetera. So we can only go that far back, scientifically. But Andrus, he says it would be very difficult, extraordinarily, he says, for organized biological matter and information to form, keyword, to be created, to form by plausible, what scientists call prebiotic conditions. Prebiotic conditions, basically, as I always say, amino acids, you need those. You need DNA of sorts. You need some kind of chemical construct like the heliocentric DNA model that can be created, generated, split in half, whatever, with other DNA to create another creature. Otherwise, everything would have died. If there was no form of transferring that information, hence, basically what we call procreation, how two organisms come together and mate, procreate, and then they form a new creation. None of it leads to answers. It actually leads to more questions. Andrus lists these in his article, but I, for the video's sake, will just point out a few. He illustrates that this process of plausible prebiotic conditions forming new life is like trying to compare writing a coherent article for a leading science website by tossing random letters onto a page. Now, that is an example that I remember from college and grad school. So 15 years ago, that was an argument that it is more plausible to take, let's just say you take a huge dictionary. My grandfather had one that was like, geez, it was 7-8 inches thick. Traditional old school dictionary. Now chop it up, every letter from every page, from every word. Chop up every letter into little bitty bits of pieces of paper with one letter only. Now, throw them up in the air and let them fall. Or put them in a bag and dump them out. It's more plausible for an article, a coherent article, to fall into place. Words and spaces and sentences and paragraphs and pages. It's more plausible for that to happen than for life to spontaneously come out of nowhere on this planet. That is a widely respected argument. And the website points to that complexity. And so the complexity actually is increased. And the probability of success quickly just drops to near zero, 0.00001. And then they explore this issue a little bit. Andrus explains this principle from taking information technology data into the AI model that they had and the algorithm to estimate what would it take for the first simple cell known as a protocell. They call that, it's either Biologists will call it protocell. There's another term for it. What is it called? It's singularity. The moment of singularity, like the Big Bang. We're trying to create the Big Bang all over again. You can't. The singularity concept is also for science, physics-wise, we'll use that. But biology, they'll use protocell. It's almost near impossible for that protocell to come out of nowhere, then assemble itself from basic chemical ingredients from their surrounding area. Actually, the math points towards it disintegrating and failing, a trillion times over. That even if it did start, it wouldn't really continue. It wouldn't gestate and continue over millions and millions, really billions, 4.5 billion years of chemical, biological formation of life to new life to new life to new life. That is the continuity theory. If you take me into my parents and their parents and their parents, and you go all the way to Adam and Eve, well, then you go to what science says Neanderthals and cavemen, and then, go even farther back, and you got, all these other prehistoric humanoids that connect us to apes. I think that's an insult, really. I think that's just stupid and foolish, and honestly, it's not disgusting, but it's really low. Really, you're going to compare me to an ape? The ape intelligence is pretty basic, pretty low. Yeah, nothing really, it's not coherent. Those who try to piece those puzzles together, some of that science is laughable. But this approach, the protocell approach, and how it assembles from basic chemicals, reveals that the odds of such a process happening naturally are just exceedingly astonishingly low. So, why chance alone may not be enough? That was the midpoint of the article, and I took a few notes, so I'm trying my best here to entertain you. The findings suggest that random chemicals, reactions, and natural processes may not fully, explain how life appears within a limited time, too, on Earth. Because systems naturally tend towards disorder and death and dissolve. And you ever try to... I can't garden. Where's the darn? I've tried it. I try to grow plants. I've tried to grow bulbs. Even perennials and bulbs, which are they're very easy to plant. Mine die. I can't figure out how to get, I don't have a green thumb. So if I can't even get regular, and some people can't, they have a black thumb or whatever, regular life to procreate, etc. Or even just how 1 out of 3 now, 30% of couples cannot conceive. Used to be a lot easier. I mean, Irish Catholics, we had a dozen babies each. My grandmother had a dozen kids, her sister had a dozen kids, and my great-grandfather had 13 kids. I come from a big family, and half of those kids have half a dozen as well. That seemed kind of easy, but nowadays, everyone's having 1 to 2 babies. People are, using contraception because of, for all kinds of reasons. They're not open to life, and, there's a real epidemic. I have so many young couples who can't conceive. 1 out of 3. It used to be 1 out of 4, but it's gone from 25% of couples down to about 31%. I don't know how to explain it other than God has something to do with it. And live a life of grace, and He might bless you with a child. That's just a pastoral approach that I share with people. Pray, trust, surrender. That's the Christian approach to procreating and building a family, natural family planning, etc. Back to the article. Because these systems naturally tend to fall apart, building the intricate, it says, molecular organization required for life would have been a serious major challenge, it says. I'm like, well, no kidding. He says, although life doesn't mean that life's origins was impossible, the doc argues that current scientific models are missing huge key elements. That's fair. He emphasizes that identifying the physical principles behind life's emergence from non-living matter remains one of the greatest mysteries unsolved in all biology. He says biological physics, so yeah, fancy word for biology. To conclude, he says, and this gets a little weird, so bear with me. She's so sweet. She's my, she'll sit, okay, let's go. She's sitting there waiting for me to tell her she can go. The study briefly considers something called panspermia, which is a big hoaxy-doxy, it's a stupid theory. It is a theory. It's a controversial idea, really, proposed by Francis Crick and Leslie something. The other, Orgel. I might have botched that up. They hypothesize and suggest that life could have been transmitted and introduced to Earth by advanced extraterrestrial civilizations. So that's kind of the weirdness out there, that people are coming up with ideas like, well, life can't be explained through sciences, so it must have been from aliens. Or maybe God did it. Maybe there is a God. If, you know, I think it's 1 out of 40, 2/3 of people believe in God. I think that's the statistic. It's actually higher, I think. But, you know, 1 out of 3 struggle and don't. That 2/3 is open to life being formed by God. And the other niche of people are trying to find answers to how things are here, and they still deny the more plausible explanation that it was an intelligent designer, not aliens, but a divine God. Plus, we have so much other evidence of God interacting. Not just Jesus, but, man, there's a lot of miracle stories. A lot of people with miracles and near-death experiences, just really tens of thousands. That phenomenon alone points towards something that exists outside of our understanding of life. The doc, Andres Robert, acknowledges the idea and says that, I can't believe he says that, he says it's logically possible. I say that's just baloney. He notes that Occam's razor is the problem because that principle favors simpler explanations. Look up Occam's razor. It's an excellent way to philosophize, debate, and try to come up with some plausible theory. It's been used in science since Occam for hundreds and hundreds of years. And so, my hand is shaking. I'm sorry. I'm trying my best to do a video about this while I'm holding a sticky in my notes. He says, rather than ruling out natural origins, the research provides a way to quantify how difficult the process may have been. So that I appreciate. That he's saying, we might not have come up with a solution of how plausible this comes about statistically, but what we do see is that it is very extreme and rare how plausible it could have come. When you get to the 0.0000001% plausibility that we all came from nothing, yeah, that's a pretty big zero. Last but not least, you know, he says that the work is, at least, it represents an important area, which I agree. That's why they call it natural philosophy. And it turned into natural sciences. We don't teach philosophy anymore. We've forgotten it. We've forgotten Aristotle and Plato and Zeno and Parmenides and Socrates. These were the first scientists, really. Philosophers who thought with their heads and looked at nature, specifically Aristotle, and said, you know, how did this all come about? So we're going back in the right direction. I think we could go back to science, biology, everything, and go back to natural philosophy, because it's a shame that they just deleted it and kicked it out, and nobody touches it. Even in, you know, grad school, and the only way you learn it is really if you're in seminary. Very rarely do anyone study this outside of the topic of philosophy. So if you want to study philosophy and get your doctorate in philosophy, yeah, you'll touch upon natural philosophy and sciences, but not in college. They don't teach this in biology. They don't teach it in high school. They touch upon it very briefly in one little paragraph in the first chapter of Biology 101 for sophomores. So, to end, the study is a reminder that some of the most profound questions in science remain unanswered, specifically how, in using math and AI models, that biology really is really complex and extremely hard to explain, and it's one of the oldest human mysteries, and I tend to agree. So, yeah, food for thought. We have used AI models to come up with using data, how plausible it would be for everything to come about in the way it did from non-matter, from single-celled organisms. Big lightning strike in a big bowl of liquid-filled amino acids and enzymes and complex material to get life, you're talking amoebas here, single-celled organisms, to trillion-celled organisms called human beings. Food for thought.